Welcome to the Secure Start podcast, brought to you by the Secure Start Aura apps, supporting trauma-informed care and practice at home and in school.
I think this is important to understand that if you say in Germany, I lived in a group home, that's like the main setting that young
Mm,
people in care live in. But we have the same like challenges as other young people globally that we have multiple placements, sometimes instability. But in Germany, I would say there's two cliff edges. The standards that are set for young people in care are so much higher
yeah.
than for their peers. Like, what made you grow up?
Mm,
Like, it was not the first meal that you cooked, maybe at the age of 25,
mm,
but it was knowing that someone was there for you. Like in your heart, like you approach them as children, and
mm,
like you treat them not, and I don't mean patronizing,
mm.
but with the empathy and compassion that a young person would need. I sometimes wonder why it is so hard to imagine for people that the things that are good for themselves are good for young people and care as well. It's like talking about your experience and realizing this is a collective experience is not only healing but very powerful. And for me, like poverty prevention would be welfare prevention. This was the moment where the room went really quiet, like when this young person spoke from their heart and their experience was like, yeah, then pay them. At least pay them.
Mm.
If you make them a prop, at least pay them accordingly.
Welcome to the Secure Start podcast. I'm Colby Pierce, and joining me for this episode is a leading member of the global care leavers community. Before I introduce my guests, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands I come to you from, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and acknowledge the continuing connection the living Kaurna people feel to land, waters, culture, and community. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. My guest this episode is Tanja Abu. Tanja is a German social worker, researcher, author, and social justice educator whose work focuses on classism, intersectionality, and structural inequality. She identifies as a queer, poverty class academic and brings together academic research, lived experience, and political education. Tania works at the University of Hildesheim on the Care Leaver Statistics Project, the first longitudinal study of young people transitioning out of residential and foster care. Alongside her research, she teaches and facilitates workshops on anti-classism and is a founding member of the Institute for Classism Research. Tanya's background includes years of practice in Berlin's youth welfare system and training as a systemic therapist. She is the author of Classism in the Education System, a critique of structural barriers and the stigmatisation of poverty in education. Beyond academia and activism, Tania also works creatively as a children's book author, comics artist, and occasionally as a DJ. So, Tanya, it's really good to have you here very early at your end on the Secure
Yes.
Start podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me at 7 a.m. in the morning, my time.
Yes, of course, you're in Germany and
Yeah.
I'm in South Australia, so we're 7.5 hours apart. And you've graciously agreed to come on at this early hour on a public holiday of all days as
On a
well.
public holiday, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Yeah, so my name's Tanja Abu. I start from from now and then I go back.
Hmm.
So I'm a research fellow at the University of Hildesheim, and
Mm,
I work in the first longitudinal study on leaving care, like the first that is not
mm,
concentrated on one institution, but on like the whole of Germany and
mm,
foster families as well as residential care. And before that, I was a social worker for nearly 10 years. I also ran a bar at some point, like a collective bar. I'm like very much from this like circle of people who like start self-organized projects and
mm.
I've been an activist for, I would say, all my life in all different kinds of fields, but like since the mid 2010s, when I would say I always spoke very openly about being a care leaver. Like back then, you didn't use that word, but this is like the
Mm.
one that like globally has like developed into the term that everybody uses. Not everybody,
Yeah.
but like a lot of people like use the term care leaver now. And I joined a project with other care leavers and then realized like how little like in research and any kind of discourse, the voices of the
Mm.
people who have been in the system themselves are represented. So, yeah, since then I have been also an activist and locally and globally organized and connected to other care leavers.
Yes,
That's
and
me in a nutshell.
yes, and of course I met you a couple of months ago on a Zoom call with a number of members of the Global Care Leavers Forum
Community.
community. Yeah,
Yeah, GCLC. Yeah.
GCLC, that's it. And you'll be the third member of that group that's been on the podcast after Serja and Nimu from India and Sri Lanka, respectively.
Yeah,
And hope,
which are the two of three members that I met in person actually. Like
yes.
we like a few years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we were in Split together at the FITA
Mm.
conference. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I like what you were saying, talking about self-starting. And of course, Sergio in particular is very much involved in a program that exists in India through Udayan Care to, or supported by Udayan Care to assist care leavers to develop ideas into enterprises or endeavors as such, which is remarkable, really.
Yeah, I mean, Diane is like super special, like in terms of like really accompanying the young people that were in care for a really long time and giving them job opportunities and education. And I mean, I've known Soja since 5 years now,
Mm.
more or less. And like, I mean, she turned into this like speaker and like the speaker person, and it's just wonderful to see everybody growing from that
Yes.
community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, we've worked together, like not all people in the group, but we've worked together since 2020. That was the Global Care Leavers Convention. that was
Mm,
supposed to be held in India, and there were like different players organizing that event, which were Vize Germany and the University of Hildesheim. No, Vize, Kinderperspektiv, which is Vize in the Netherlands,
mhm.
and the University of Hildesheim, Udayan, and
Other.
one group I forgot. But I hope nobody kills me for that.
No.
But yeah, like this was supposed to be held in India, but
Mm,
because of COVID, it was turned into an online conference. And ever since then, like we started the Global Caregivers Community WhatsApp group. We had an online community, like some kind of exchange board. And we've been like on and off with different kind of modes of organizing. Like we had a
mm,
secretary for a while, and then we decided because this position kind of fluctuated over the years without us being in control of the position of
mm,
the secretary for the global care leavers community. And then we decided that we, as the care leavers, will form a core group,
mhm,
which will be like the steering group of the global care leavers community. And since in our respective countries we're all very active and also connected to
mm,
the local communities, and we have no funding and
mm,
all, like we are like most of us are care leavers like 24/7, and
mm,
sometimes I have to step back and be like, okay, let's do some gardening because otherwise I'll be
mm,
drained from all the
yeah,
activism, and it's my job. And a lot of
mm,
people who are my close friends are care leavers, and I love being in that community, but from time to
mm,
time it's like, okay, let's step back. And so sometimes we have times where we meet very frequently, and like Soja is like the one who's like always pushing, like
mhm,
who will be the one to send a message. Hey, let's connect. And yeah, but we've been a group, and I think in the last meeting that we had, we said that this group still exists and
mhm,
that we still do this kind of work while we're locally organizing, but also like keeping an eye on the global Calibus community is incredible in itself. And
mm,
we are still working towards becoming an independent organization with funding, but we
mm.
will get to that maybe in 5 to 10 years.
Well, let's hope you do, and maybe not even that far away. It is remarkable to hear about the way you're organising together internationally at the representation. I remember we had someone from the Horn of Africa on that call a couple of months ago as well, and can't remember where the last, but there was five of us. I think there was another person, but apologies to that person. I do remember them. I just can't place where they were in the world. Um, we talked a lot in
Yes,
that conversation about how early it was for the person in
for
Africa. That's
everyone.
why it was for everyone. Yes, we were on
Yeah.
Indian time. We were on Indian time for that call. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We're always on Indian time for these calls. I have to claim German time at some point.
yes, well, of course, they're 5 hours behind me, so this would be a morning meeting with Serja and probably Nimu as well. Um,
Yeah.
now, I want to get on to talking about the about care leavers and care leavers in Germany, but I think people who are listening to this podcast are but going to be primarily English speaking and won't really know much about the out of home care system in Germany. And I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about what the out-of-home care system looks like in Germany.
Um, yeah. It's actually for the number of young people in care is not that high. It's like
Mm,
around 120,000.
hmm
It's like if you live in a big country, as Germany, is actually quite a little number of young people.
mm,
And I think what I had to understand talking to other people from the global north, and I think
hmm
it's a bit wild because in the global south, it's way more common that young people in care are in residential groups or group homes,
hmm
and which is the same for Germany. So it's
mm,
way more common to be in residential care, like in group homes or
hmm
like smaller, like not like foster families. And like
mm,
foster
mm,
families are the minority
mm,
amongst like the setting in
hmm
Germany. And I think this is something that took me a while to understand, because when I came to I went to the US and Canada
hmm
a few years ago when I started working at the University of Hildesheim, which is wild in itself that, you meet other researchers in the field
mm,
and you travel the world just to sit down with other people and have a cup of tea and talk about living care research. Is so exciting.
mm,
Okay, but understanding that, for instance, in the US, like they try to place young people within the communities where they came from. Like, first of
mm,
all, they look if there are family members, community members, and putting or placing young people in group homes is kind of last resort.
yes.
And and they told me that if you're in a group home, you are kind of considered as I do not like
No.
stigmatizing language, but I just repeat it at that point, like that you're kind of considered like a special case or
Mm,
difficult.
mm,
And I think this is important to understand that if you say, in Germany, I lived in a group home, that's like the main setting that young
mm,
people in care live in. And yeah, I mean, there's like a long history of changes in legislation, like and I think the main changes have been from the oh, translation, Jugendwohlfahrtsgesetz, like the Youth Welfare Code
mm,
from the Children and Youth Welfare Act. And
mhm,
now it's the Children Youth Support Act. And I think
mm,
there's like fine lines in the wording, because before it was focused on like help, and now
mhm,
it's focused on support. And the last changes were made in 2021, and a
mhm,
lot of good things have actually put in place, like aftercare support and
mm,
like we had some really really big achievements in
mm,
the legislation in Germany. Like we have the comeback option,
mhm,
which means that if you left care theoretically, and we were speaking theoretically and like
mm,
law-wise, you would have the possibility to go back to the youth welfare services and say, "Hey, I actually failed. Can I come back?" Like which is based on the
mm,
idea that other young people who leave their homes
mhm,
or like the assigned grown-ups,
mm,
like they can come back to like family support or other settings. And this is to kind of imitate that situation.
mm,
But I'm saying like this is a theoretical
mhm,
like new regulation because like the local municipalities have to act on the law. So like
Mm,
there is a nationwide law, but it like really depends on like your local little governments to put the rights
mm,
that young people have in place. And one thing that I could actually shock people with, like I had care leavers from the UK, that it was an achievement, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, that young people in care did not have to give a part of their income to the state if they had an income. So, for a really long time, it was in the law that young people in care who earned money had to pay 75% of that income back to the state. And that was based on the logic or in the legislation that like everybody had to contribute to the care system who was using it. So the parents had to pay their share and so the kids as well. And
mm,
we argued for years that this is so not only unfair, but it's unthinkable. Like you would
mm,
not ask your kid to give you like 75% of their income,
mm,
and you would encourage young people to take up jobs and like
mm,
get used to having like a work rhythm in their life. And then this is
mm.
completely discouraging. And so it was actually a major achievement that young people in care did not have to pay for their placements or had to like contribute with their income to their placements.
Wow. So that was a major achievement of the 2021 changes.
Yeah,
That yeah, that
exactly.
young people. There's so much in what you're saying there. You said, I think also that parents also have to contribute if their children are in state care, or at least they had to up until that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
mean the pa like the parents depending on their income.
mm,
And I mean, I think that's something that is true globally, that mostly like economically disadvantaged young people are
mm,
in care. I don't say that there aren't like young people from more affluent families, but from my experience or from what I see and know, um, like people who have money have other solutions. Like maybe they
mm.
send their kids to boarding
Boarding
schools
school.
if
Mm,
so. I actually had a colleague that I had really, really interesting conversations about this
mm,
because she was sent to boarding school when like she hit puberty, and then like there were fights with the parents, and then like she went to boarding school, which was their solution for
hmm,
like not functioning well as a family or not being well in touch. And I would really like to see some research on that because there's like this
mm,
huge stigma on young people in care that like we're all from like dysfunctioning, poor families, and
mm,
which is structurally true-ish, but
mm,
it's because rich families can afford to keep these kind of things private, and it doesn't mean that there aren't
mm.
problems in rich or families who had
Means.
easy access to formal education.
Mm,
And
mm,
so I think there's really a disbalance in representation, that young people from families who are already in need
mm.
are overrepresented in the
Yeah.
care system.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had a previous guest talk about poverty as being addressing poverty as being one of the um, most powerful, potentially most powerful preventive measures against child maltreatment and children ending up in out-of-home care. So there is definitely a socioeconomic element to it, but I think in a previous lifetime, I was a researcher also, and yeah, it's spoken like a. I was thinking, spoken like a true researcher to look beyond what the official account and the official figures represent. That yeah, absolutely. If people have means, then they have options other than and on that using that word option, you referred to the the stigma, I guess, outside of Germany, perhaps in the more English speaking West, about being in residential care and residential care being seen as an option of last resort. And it's not seen by everyone as that, of course, and there are moves afoot, including through this podcast, to change some of the rhetoric around residential care. But if it's not the option of last resort and if it's the primary modality of care in Germany, what would you say it looks like in Germany, residential care?
For yeah, I would say, I mean, it's a very diverse experience. Like there's not like
Mm,
single care experience. And I mean for some young people it means, and it was the same for me, that to experience like safety and stability, and
mm,
like for the first time maybe in their lives. And also because, and it's also a class aspect, because
mm,
like you are not put in one room with like your three, four siblings. Like you have
mm,
space, you have a fridge that is full of food, and like it's like very, I mean, it is a middle class oriented system. So the
mm,
standards that are set are very middle class, and it can be also like kind of a shock
mhm,
to like if you come from like a materially and like space deprived
mm,
setting. It can be a culture shock in a way. And
mm,
but we have the same like challenges as other young people globally, that we have multiple placements, sometimes instability,
mm,
like we have a lack of places,
mhm,
and like there's sometimes a lack of participation, like even though by law, and like there's always like what is theoretically the law,
mhm,
like by law, you have to be asked. There is the right to like choose your placement. Theoretically, there
mm,
is the right to choose the person who becomes like your primary caseworker, but there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of places, and there's a lack of people who work in the system. Like the German
mm,
words like Fachkräftemangel is like a lack of qualified personnel
mm,
who like who work in who would work in the system.
mhm,
And it's become actually a huge crisis, and it
mm,
it always ends with being like carried out on the backs of the young people, because they
mm,
live in the group homes with like one carer who has to take care of six people from different age groups, who
mm,
probably parentifies the older kids to
mhm,
take care of the younger, because this is a way of organizing the the lack of resources from the system.
Mm,
And like I'm not saying that people are not doing their work well, but
mm,
the systemic lack of qualified people, the
mm,
lack of resources that are put in the child and youth welfare system. And actually, right now, we're having a huge discussion of cutting funds for
mm,
child and youth welfare. Like, we had the least popular chancellor ever in history in
mm,
Germany,
mm,
who is a rich billionaire
mhm,
who only thinks from his class and from his possibilities. And for him, it's unimaginable, like
mm,
the lack of resources that young people in care have, or also like during the life course, that
mm.
they have no safety net to fall back onto. And this is true like globally and
Yeah.
locally. Like when we
Mm,
talk about the care system in my like national groups, but also internationally, like there is a dread before your 18th birthday,
mm.
which, you know, like usually you would be excited that you
Yes.
turn 18, that now you're a grown up. And actually, there's like two like cliff edges. Like there's sometimes it's called like the cliff edge, your 18th
Yes.
birthday. But in Germany, I would say there's two cliff edges because from the age of 16 on, you're very much pushed to go live on your own. And I'm putting that in quotation
Mm,
marks as well. Because like from group home, they will ask you to live in your own flat
mhm,
and have a very limited budget where you buy all your stuff yourself. You
mm,
don't have, you usually have a social worker who's assigned a certain amount of numbers, but you're not 24/7 like
mm,
supervised anymore,
mhm,
which feels if you're 16 and somebody tells you, here, I give you money, I give you a flat, and I give you a person who comes like twice or three times
mm,
a week, it sounds very like it is tempting.
mm,
Like it was the same for me. Like when and this has not changed for
mm,
decades, that 16 is the age where they will start to push you like into a cheaper mode
mm.
of care.
Yeah. Mm,
And then which is like the side like of okay, I do not have to live in the group home. I do not have to deal with all the other people. I do not have to deal with the fluctuation. I do not have to be worried about my caretaker who is like overwhelmed and swamped with work all the time.
mm,
So it is tempting, but and I don't say that, or I'm a bit tired to always ask people like, what would you do if this was your child?
mm,
But like this kind of like emotionalizing and pulling at heartstrings kind of questions that we always ask people. But this is, I mean, it is wild for me that a person who has like a 16-year-old child, and if the young person, and they are still children, if
mm,
they would say, oh, okay, mom, dad, I'm going to move out like in the middle of my education, and yeah, just give me
mm,
500 bucks a month, and I'll check in with you like twice a week. And
mm,
every parent in their mind would say, look, I love you. I raised you, and I'll raise you, or I go on raising you
yeah.
until you finished your school or until you have stable income, until
Mm,
I know you can afford this, and until like we have trained a few things.
Mm,
And for young kids in care, it's from 16, you're like in some kind of accelerated grown-up boot camp because you're like, here's your
mm,
money, here's like, be self-organized, be independent. And
mm,
it's become buzzwords. And then at 18, I mean, in Germany, we are in the privileged situation that there is extended support after 18, but you have to write a letter to the child welfare services in which areas, as a young person, 18, maybe like finishing high school, like you
mm,
have to write a letter. You don't write a letter on your 18th birthday to your parent why you still have a right to have a roof over your head.
mm.
And like the standards that are set for young people in care are so much higher
Yeah.
than for their peers. And the
Mm,
the average age of young people moving out of their homes in Germany is 24.5 or 25, like something somewhere
mm-hmm.
around
Yeah.
that age.
Yeah.
And for young people in care from the age of 16 on, they have to prove that they can cook for themselves, handle money. And there are these kinds of, and like very instrumentalized checklists, what
Mm,
people will use to mark you as independent. It's like, yeah, gets up in the morning to go to school or to like some kind of training.
training.
Yeah, to yeah, can cook for themselves, has a tenner left at the end of the month.
Mm,
Like these kind of, and like I actually, when I was working in the system, one of my colleagues was like brought in one of those lists. They exist. They're like checklists. Like you,
mm-hmm.
you really like check boxes. And none of them has to do anything with how emotionally stable a person is, how
Mm,
well connected they are to a community. There's no question about loneliness, which has
mm,
like increased immensely, especially during COVID.
mm,
And like these kind of like questions of well-being, questions of like are you do you have a sense of having a place in the world? Are you
mm.
well? Like the kind of interest that I would have in a person that I love and care for,
Yeah.
which care should be. But then she came in with these lists, and I had a laughing fit. Like I
Mm,
I took it and I started laughing hysterically, and I could not explain to her why it was so absurd for me, because for her it's like the revelation of like having a tool to measure
mm,
if a young person had improved. And it's like, and I was always like, they're young people. They're basically like crazy little people pushing your boundaries who
mm.
like poke at every like little hole that they see in you. And your job as a grown up is be the stable one, be a role model, and like show them that you stick around no matter
Yeah.
what they do. This is like the job of a
Mm-hmm.
teenager. It's
Mm,
it is. And I could not make myself understood in that setting, like that. I thought this was an absolutely useless tool. If the young person themselves did not want to use it for like becoming self-organized, But as a person with a lot of power from the system, going
mm,
in there with a list and being like, okay, so you can wash your clothes, check. You can cook for yourselves, check. You can buy groceries, check. It's like,
mm,
what, like, what made you grow up?
mm,
Like, it was not the first meal that you cooked, maybe at the age of 25,
mm.
but it was knowing that someone was there for you. And
It's something that has been in my mind a lot in my own practice over a long period of time. I think the tension you're making is the difference between can they and will they. Can they and will they? So can they do these things? Yes. Will they do these things? Maybe, but that would depend on some of those other things that you said. That would depend on whether they have feel like they can access supports, that they have a support structure around them that they can believe in, people that will be there for them. It depends on individual variables like, do I see myself as worthy of those supports? As do I see others as being trustworthy and reliable? Um, you're talking, I think, the difference between, and the other way I talk about it is in terms of motivation. Like some people will often, they can do something, but will they do it? Well, no, they won't necessarily because their motivation, they're not necessarily motivated to do those things. Their motivation is about resolving, as you say, other personal issues like loneliness and connection and I think those sorts of inner factors have, really have the potential, and I've seen it in my own work of um, sending things off the rails, so to speak. Yeah. So
yeah.
the lonely 16-year-old in the setting that you're talking about, can they wash their clothes? Can they cook a meal? Can they do it? Yes. What will they do? The first thing they'll do is they'll try to recreate that experience of connection of being in a group home. So they'll invite people into their home who may or may not be a good influence, and so so it rolls out from there. So I'm totally with what you're saying, that it is a it's preposterous is another word we would use. It's preposterous to suggest that that young people, even below, pick a number, 20, 22, 24. It depends on their upbringing. It depends on the family environment. It depends on so many different things. Their maturity.
No, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but the biggest contradiction is that the more boxes people check on these young people, the less support they get.
Hmm.
So it's as soon as, and that's what I said, like at 18, you write the letter and
Mm,
and like you have like this conference like in the beginning it's like every year when you're still
mhm,
like a minor, and they increase the frequency the older you get. So there's a lot
mhm,
of pressure, and like you always have to articulate what you're not capable of yet and how you're going to achieve it. And
mm.
like this
Wow.
is and then they do like every 6 months and then every 3 months. And like you're a young person, like the your placement, the roof over your head depends on performing well in these
Mm,
like youth welfare conferences.
mm,
Sometimes was like you're a caseworker, you're a social worker. If you're under 18, a parent is invited. If you're lucky, they don't participate. But Like you have a very artificial setting where you
mm,
as the young person have to like manage like your life or present yourself as a manager of your life and in a
mm,
very and I would say it's like inhumane. Like
mm,
it's not fair to a young person who is in that system. And then at the age of 18, like if you check all these boxes from these absurd papers, the Child Protective Services will say, okay, now you're independent enough to be without support from the system. And having a roof over your head and to say, okay, but if you kick me out now, I will fail are not no reasons to stay in the system. There always has to be some kind of deficit. And that
mm,
makes it like very deficit oriented. And like what is the signal to young people in care in Germany is, okay, the better you function, the less support you get.
mm,
So, and there's like a very thin line to walk on. If you're too problematic, you are considered not cooperative and you're
mm,
being kicked out. So like there's like this very thin line of being like considered cooperative, nice enough, worthy of support, and still needy enough to be
mm,
worthy of that support. And like it's yeah, it's like very um I think it's draining for a
mm,
young person. And if you have social workers who jump on these narratives of the not complying young person or the oh so independent person who became resilient because they had to,
mm,
like you actually need social workers who are capable and you need a system that support these social workers so they don't burn out to look
mm,
behind these like very technocratic like kind of goals they set with the young people.
mm, mm. Yeah. I think I'm wondering about what the preferred way of doing it would be, or particularly what your thoughts are. I have some thoughts about that, and I was in my head. I was pausing then because I was thinking, do I just say what I think should happen? No, I have Tanya on here. We'd all I would, and I'm sure the listeners would love to hear about how you think it should look at 16 and at 18 for young people in Germany who are in care.
Like, first of all, they should be treated as young people and actually the children that they are. And like, of course, you never, ever in your life tell a teenager you're still a child. Like
No.
this is, this is like you you approach that with like the dignity and respect a 16-year-old needs in their very
Mm,
grown-up mind. But like in your heart, like you approach them as children and
mm,
like you treat them not, and I don't mean patronizing, but
mm,
with the empathy and compassion that a young person would need. And that makes it so hard, I think, also for people who work the system, that that there is this lack of funding
mm,
and they are cutting at the most vulnerable populations first. They do not tax the rich. They cut any kind of funding, like any kind of scrap that they gave to marginalized populations.
mm,
And um, like I sometimes wonder why it is so hard to imagine for people
Mm,
that the things that are good for themselves are good for young people and care as well. It's like stable long-term relationships and
mm,
like genuine participation in what happens with your life and to you and to you instead of like symbolic
mhm,
or like fake participation and like continuity instead of multiple placements.
mm,
Like these are like sometimes I'm talking to people and like use your common sense. Like use
mm,
like what would you consider like a normal childhood? And put that kind of like not even like excellent, but normal
ordinary.
childhood, like and like give young people access to mental health support. And I was actually there's this organization called the Global no the National Leaving Care Benchmarking Forum
Hmm.
in the UK.
Yeah.
And we were invited as like research team and self-organizations for a big celebration where Princess Anne actually showed up
Hmm.
and who has a voice like I have now, like a little hoarse.
Mm,
And like they do mental health education with the young people. And the way the members of the National Leaving Care Benchmarking Forum talked about like themselves, like the kind of self-realization that they had about,
mm,
okay, this is this and that kind of mechanism, and what I need now is like a room that is a bit more quiet, and they actually like had a room where you could like go into where you had like earmuffs and or earplugs and you had skills everywhere like these things you could pop or things to fiddle with
mm,
some pen and paper so you could just draw some stuff and I was like OMG, like if I had these tools as a 16-year-old, if I
mm,
would have known things about myself that these young people know, it would have like skipped me like a great deal of sorrow and also the people
mm,
around me. Like,
mm,
because if you don't know, if you do not get good mental health support and education, there's so many things that you find out like little by little.
mhm,
And like we published an article with 6 care leavers. And because there is like this thin line of being like either you have to function very well or you considered like difficult. And if you're considered too difficult, they will put you like in closed institutions or in
mm,
like psychiatric institutions. And while we talked, we realized that a lot of us did not start therapy very late in our life because we thought that going to therapy
mm,
would mark us as the difficult ones.
mm,
And so like this was and this is also like very like it baffles me also in research that these kind of topics are not really looked into. Like it's always like focused on like housing, education, finances, sometimes relationships. And there's like it's repeated over and over and over again.
Mm,
But for instance, the mental health effects of systemic pressure. And I really hope that some researchers are listening to the podcast and write some research project, because I think there have to be more research that is inspired by actually like people who live the system.
mm, mm,
And this was something I always I sometimes told people that I was always afraid to start therapy because I saw young people from my group home disappearing and not coming back when they were considered too difficult. And
mm,
just and this is why I value these care leaver spaces so much and the self-organizations, because like any empowerment space of like any marginalized group, talking about your experience and realizing this is a collective experience is not only healing but very powerful, because then you can name the lack of support in the system
mm,
and what actually like and yeah, a system that functions on authority and not
mm,
on co-production is doing to your life.
mm,
And there's actually another change in legislation that I forgot, that self-organizations have to be supported by the residential care facilities, by youth welfare services. So in theory, and maybe we have to go down another 10 years until this legislation has been put into effect actually. But this was also an achievement of the self-organizations who pushed into the legislation that young people have to have the spaces where they self-organize. And
mm,
a lot of people sometimes see self-organizing as threat to their authority, which is a problem in itself, because why are you scared of young people creating stable connections that will
mm.
carry them longer than any kind of like
Professional. Mm,
professional support.
mm,
But like from my experience, it like carers and professionals and also like other people in the system see self-organizations as something that is threatening.
mm,
But I think it's absolutely necessary to balance out the power imbalance that there is.
mm,
And yeah, I think that was also like a major achievement. And we have to also like get into the young people's minds that self-organizing is not being the difficult one
mm.
sometimes. Yeah.
It's almost, I mean, there's so many parallels in what you're saying. So, um, there's, and this I think is a problem, wherever I've spoken to people, including, from around the world and in my own local jurisdiction, is this an inordinate focus on behaviours of concern and the so-called, you said, was describing it as the so-called difficult ones, the ones that are presenting with behaviours that challenge us, and that's on the one hand, and we think people or systems try to turn their mind to how do we deal effectively with those behaviours of concern. And there's also an inordinate focus on, as you were talking a little bit ago, about being able to demonstrate on skills development and being able to demonstrate skills. Yeah. And I think and this is a bit like what I was trying to say earlier, there's not enough consideration of what lies beneath all that anywhere. Yeah, so so if you don't consider what lies beneath, then you can end up with, can children do something? Yes. Will they do it? Maybe not. That can be problematic. Also, you can end up with situations where children's own feeling of disenfranchisement, of worthlessness, of inability to trust and in relationships and make and maintain stable ones is just perpetuated by getting by people who only respond to the behaviours that they're presenting with and not look beneath it. So I think, and you said something which is very simple, very, very simple, but also very powerful, which is um, we need to see them as children, not little
And
adults.
not tell them, not tell them.
And but not tell them that. And interestingly, in my own jurisdiction, one of the things that I've noticed is that our young people can't wait, by and large, can't wait to not have the government running their lives anymore. So it can be very tricky to keep them involved in support service provision if they are really dissatisfied with how the government has run their life growing up. But so I think seeing them as they are as children, again, we're almost getting back to first principles. It's seeing them as they are, not what they can do or show that they can do, or not necessarily the behaviours that they're predominantly presenting or that they're presenting from time to time. And you also highlighted a very interesting paradox in there, which is that, as I heard it, that we have a very overbearing system, controlling system. Like there's a very powerful system um, that is essentially saying to to our young people, we need you to be adults and to be self-determining and to get on and live your life without any power sharing there.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, yeah, and it's also and another paradox is that when you present yourself, and I'm not saying that you overcome all these hurdles, like if you present yourself as a person who overcame all these like adverse circumstances, you are celebrated. Like
mm,
you are celebrated as like the independent caregiver. You are like the poster child of like, look, it can work. And nobody asks like, why did
mm,
young people have to become independent so early? Why did
mm,
young people have to develop very grown-up skills very early? And another, like the meanest thing about this kind of celebration of like the ones who made it is that we as the caregivers, like we know how many young people did not make it and that were maybe our best friends in the residential
mm,
facility that we lived in. That was maybe our brother or sister who didn't make it. And it always comes with a sting. And I know that there's
mm,
like I can like put it in like very fancy words, like, yeah, there's survivor's guilt, but there's actually little to no research because everybody is so relieved that they have someone that they can, like kind of
great.
soften their bad conscience with by saying, but you made it. You made it.
Mm,
And, like inside you're like, yeah, but there's so many people who didn't. And I should not be like this exception from the rule who
mm,
like yeah came from like adverse childhood like circumstances and fought her way through the education system, and then yeah, she was homeless, and then she at some point like went to university, and now she's a researcher. I mean, it's like some kind of like Hollywood like dream narrative that
Mm,
people like cling to. And there's also again like a thin line between like being really proud and being like, I did that myself, and not forgetting like where you came from, and not
mm,
like taking this kind of um praise as like the end of the story, but like mirroring this kind
mm,
of like admiration and saying like, yeah, but what I had to do to like, I lost so much time,
mm,
energy, like that I shouldn't have had to lose, was the, if you call it potential, was the potential that I had. I should be like somewhere else.
mm.
But you're just being praised for surviving.
Yeah.
And that it's like kind of like Hunger Games. This Hunger Games situation.
Mm,
Do you know
mm.
you get the reference?
Yes, I
Like,
do. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
I hope everybody else does. It's a dystopic, like, teenage thing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned a little earlier that I think is a theme that is going through this is cost. So you mentioned that if a person is able to demonstrate that they can do this, and this, then we'll celebrate and laud that, and and that will cost us less. And when I say the authorities less, but they require less support. And maybe I'm drawing too long a bow here, but I'm also thinking about what you were saying about this narrative around people who succeeded, the ones who have done well. That is very, it sounds the way you describe it, very individualistic and as something that has come from within the person. And again, if you maintain a uh, an idea, a discourse that the ones who make it are the ones who had something within them, my concern is that first suggests that some people don't when they clearly could, and secondly, it's like, well, it's they had it in them, so it's not about how much we funded support and services and service provision. It's just, some people have got it and some people have it. And maybe I'm drawing a bit of a long bow here, but I think about it as well in terms of, in English-speaking Western jurisdictions, this option of residential care or group home care has been the option of last resort, and it's rather convenient. That it is seen in that way, they will do um, the authorities, notwithstanding that it is still expensive, will be reluctant to invest in support for children who are there, notwithstanding that they may be seen as the children who needed the option of last resort. They'll be reluctant to do that because um, it costs a lot of money, and it's bad care or a bad circumstance for children to grow up in anyway. So I guess the point I'm making is that there's this theme of cost and money that if you grow up in your own biological family and it's a relatively functional biological family, of course there's financial limitations. Of course there are, but you organize your finances on being around being able to provide as best you can for your children. And a system that either overtly or unconsciously, consciously or unconsciously, is looking for ways in which to absolve itself of the financial responsibility of child rearing is problematic to my ears.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Mm.
No, like I'm completely with you. Like the individualization of structural problems is it is a huge problem. And
Mm.
for me, like poverty prevention would be welfare prevention. Like
Yeah.
if you would actually like give people or if we would live in like some kind of just or fair society where people could actually live from their jobs.
Mm.
And like if I have a single mom who's like amongst the working poor, who like works three jobs and still struggle to make ends meet, like ends meet, meet ends.
Ends meet.
Okay,
Yeah.
ends meet. Okay, English is not my first
Ends
language.
meet.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
to make ends meet. Like it is not comparable to someone who grew up comfortably and had access to like formal education. And there's like this working class writer, Dorothy Ellison, and
Mm.
she said like people like you who grew up with like this sense of having a place in the world cannot imagine that there are people like me who
Mm.
don't have that entitlement. And
Mm.
I think it's like really, and that's a problem of, and I mean, I do not want to go too much into like politics and class politics, which is one major topic that I actually also focus on. But the people who are making the rules and the legislations have no insights into the world of people who work 60 hours a week, try to give their children a good home, but still have no time and actually no leisure time for themselves. And like if jobs were paid better, like work times were more limited. And there are in Germany, there's this idea of a general income like that is without now I'm losing my words.
Mm.
Um that you do not have to work for it, and that everybody has like this basic
Yeah.
income.
Universal basic
um
income.
thank you, that was the word, like this idea
Mm.
of the universal basic income that is actually, it is possible because with all the money that is put into the welfare system and the whole apparatus around it and all the jobs around like keeping this kind of like patronizing and authoritarian structure up. If you withdraw all this and give people like this universal basic income,
Mm.
people would have more stability. But and like sometimes like I'm just baffled like how much people cling to their power and money and do not
Mm.
work towards living in a society where people are actually happy to live.
Mm.
And um like I went to Copenhagen when I was turning 17. And we did like this little bike tour. And there's in Copenhagen, there's this little part of the city, like this community, which is called Christiania. And I don't know how it is today, but back then it was like this a community where like any kind of work that had to be done for the community was distributed amongst all the people who lived there. So the more um like the jobs that were more dirty, like everybody had to do them, like taking up the trash, like cleaning
Mm.
and everybody seemed like very happy and relaxed. Okay, it's also like the part of the city where you could buy weed back then,
Mhm.
but taking that out, I was like, okay, there are models and ideas. And I do not want to live in some kind of like hippie fantasy.
Mm.
Maybe I would. But just to make lives a bit more reliable, stable, and like more easy for people who did not have like who did not win like the birth lottery.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so I mean, it is kind off topic, but it is also in the topic because I sometimes wonder, like, if my family of origin had had the means to actually lean back and to actually support
Mm.
the whole family with all kinds of resources and not like, there's this like being fed and clean is not
Mm.
necessarily like being taken care of. Like and it's like speculative because I don't know what would have happened if I grew up in a family with like stable income and no fear at the end of the month. But to know that this kind of model or that these kind of ideas exist and like maybe there would still be foster care, residential care, because there's all kinds of
Mm.
other problems. But to like give it a go and
Yeah.
try to prevent poverty first.
Mm.
Um, but from what I see and what I also said in the beginning is that they are cutting like the little scraps that they threw towards like marginalized communities and do not
Mm.
like tax rich people.
Mm. There's a lot, I think, in what you say, and I think, in particular, the experience of of communities that struggle. The experience of struggle is often not fully appreciated by policymakers, decision makers, um, and so on. And I think if we tie that back to being a global care leaver voice, but also organising and doing things in your own jurisdiction, it it really only emphasises the need for the voice of people. Care experienced is another word that is, or another term that is used now, um, that I've noticed, but any voice, well, the voice of the young people who are going through it or have gone through it, who've lived that life, is important. Important is an understatement, but it is important to fill in the gaps in what we know about what what we need to be putting into place to facilitate an ordinary life for our children and young people who have grown up in care. It's that it's that information that helps us understand if they can do it. Will they do it? Probably not. Why won't they do it? What is it that means that they're not going to do, or they may not be motivated to do, or even able to do? They can do it, but can they do it consistently over time? It's that understanding what is really their experience, what's really going on for them. And similarly, those children who are seen as being incredibly problematic. I think we need, I think we need all, and one of the things that I notice, I continue to see young people who I knew when they were in care as adults. Um, Either it's continued or they've come back to me um, through my psychotherapy practice. And some of those young people, they did it really hard, really, really hard growing up. And there's, life is still a real struggle for them, but their voice is just as valid as any other young person who's come through the care system. I'd love to, I often turn my mind to how do we get their voice, their experience. I mean, I do what I can, but I'm a observer and a describer as such. I wasn't there. I wasn't living for them. And I just, I think their voice is important. And I think another thing that you've said is that the experience of community, that community of voices is also very healing into, beyond care, being with your peers, being with people who know what you've been through.
Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying that, like in the people who are made visible also like as like there's like also like the newer term as the care leaders
Mm,
um are most often the ones who, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, like did well.
mm,
But yeah, but in the self-organizations that I'm in and in the communities, like there are also the people who are more quiet, who like
mm,
are still struggling, who are not considered like presentable.
mm-hmm,
And this is also in quotation marks. And I think that's also kind of a problem because, of course, and like what I realized, like being in a position of speaking from like one point of like or one position in a very diverse and large community is that it also creates some kind of like desire to like be, you are invited to the
mm,
conferences, you are invited to come and speak and and best would be if you're still like younger and if you are very if you can present your story and your narrative in a very touching and interesting way. And it's
mm.
become some kind of, I wouldn't say market, or maybe it is a market,
Industry.
but
Mm,
yeah, it is because
mm,
sometimes when we get requests as the Care Leavers Association, it more feels like one of those checkbook forms, like,
mm-hmm.
oh, it would be wonderful, like if a young person could come to my university seminar and like speak to the students. Oh, and maybe talk about like their story because that sticks most with the students. And I'm like, how? What a continuation of exploitation is this?
Mm,
Like if
mm,
we are again instrumentalized like for this kind of yeah, like extraction. It's like come, please, come here and be inspirational. And what actually like we had a conference in 2014, 15, I do not really remember. But
mm.
there were people invited from APIC, which is empowering people in care in Ireland.
Yes.
And they said that they actually invited state officials, like that they did not went to their like they did not go to their offices, but
mm,
they invited them to come to their community center and sit down with
mm,
them on the floor, eat pizza, and make it more comfortable for the ones in the group who did not feel like they wanted to go through the like excitement and pressure
mm,
of like, oh, now you're going to like this powerful person's office, or you're going to that conference. And it takes commitment, and it takes also a long term, like it has to have a long term perspective if
mm,
you start working with a marginalized community. And
mm,
I really like, this is something that I have recently, and there's also like I've witnessed recently a lot, and but there's also resistance because there are people who have been active for actually longer than I have been active, who actually write papers against like
mm,
this kind of extractive mindset from
mm,
also like people in the field who organize like conferences for practitioners, and
mm,
who actually like tokenize communities, and
mm,
like they would not even like pay some kind of um I mean, it doesn't have to be like the biggest amount of money, but who won't even like pay you for your time. Like they
mm,
would invite speakers and pay those other speakers according to their formal education, but lived
mm,
experience is not valued the same, while it is used to create like this
mm,
emotional moment. And I just recently
mm,
read on LinkedIn like a post from a person who was like, this was the moment where the room went really quiet, like when this young person spoke from
mm,
their heart and their experience. It was like, yeah, then pay them. At least pay them.
mm,
If you make them a prop, at least pay them accordingly. And
mm,
this is like, yeah, be like, and this is maybe also like a worn out term, but be an ally. Like if you
mm,
want to work with a marginalized community that you're not part of, like be an ally. So
mm.
breathe in,
Yes.
breathe
It,
out.
it's look at it's I know there's so many places I could take the conversation from here, but I'm aware that we're actually running out of time. It's been, but it's always those conversations that you're enjoying that seem the time seems to pass the quickest. I think the term that I think it was you when we had that conversation a couple of months back who either reminded me of it or put it in my head of trauma mining.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have a reluctance, a deep reluctance to when I one of my early guests I had on the podcast had done a podcast for someone else, and I got a link to it, and so this was so before I interviewed this guest, I looked at this other podcast, and the podcaster went straight into tell us all about your childhood experiences of blah blah, and it was brutal. You could just a person like me who's worked therapeutically with children and young people for 30 years, just we know the signs when that person is just shutting down, and yeah, and this person just kept at it and at it at it. So I hope you haven't felt like I've been trauma mining at all today. It's certainly not been my intention with any of my guests who have experienced significant adversity whilst growing up. Um, but I think I value this time that we've had together today to talk about these things, and maybe hopefully there'll be an opportunity to speak further, not only with you, but other member of the global care leavers
Cat leavers community. Yeah.
community. Yeah.
PCLC.
GCLC. Yeah. And
Yeah.
because that there is no better voice than the voice of the people who lived it.
Yeah.
Mm,
That's true.
mm. Well, thank you again, and yeah, all the best. What's next for you in terms of what over the next 6 months or a year? What are you hoping to achieve in this area of advocacy?
Well, I mean, first of all, at the point where we're at now, we're trying to prevent the cuts.
Mm,
And we're trying to like not fall back behind all the achievements that we've had in the legislation. I think this is the major point right now, and
mm,
I'm carefully optimistic that we will prevent a few of those
mm,
suggested cuts and moves, and like a bit that we can keep like Friedrich Merz from like turning back the clock for like
mm,
a few
mm,
decades. And
mm,
I think that is actually quite exhausting. You know, you
mm,
think you had your achievements, and now you have to fight for them again. And
mm,
and I hope that in 6 months' time, that yeah, that our rulers
mm,
have failed crashingly with their attempts to defund the youth and like child and youth welfare system.
mm,
And
mm.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I hope that for me personally, I'm working on my PhD, and I hope that I'll have written a good chunk of that, because I'm
Mm,
writing on care leaving communities, and
mm.
I want to like put that out in the world. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's yeah, lovely, terrific. Yes, well, we're going to have to pull up stumps, we might say, which is a cricket term. I know you don't take cricket in Germany as we do in other countries, but we will have to draw it to a close there. So, but thank you, Tanya. That was great.
thank you so much for inviting me.